Hi, my name is Dan Fernandez, and I'm the Product Manager for C#. In this MSDN TV episode, I'm going to be demoing some of the new IDE features for C# developers in the next version of Visual Studio, codenamed Whidbey. As a whole, there are three key pieces for visual C# developers in Whidbey. The first is language. So we have new features like generics, iterators, partial types, and anonymous methods. The next are IDE features, and in particular code-focused RAD features where we bring RAD directly into the editor. And there we're talking about features like refactoring, code expansions, debugger visualizations, IntelliSense, and more. And then finally the platform where we build applications on top of, using ASP.NET, Windows Forms, MS Build, Click Once, SQL Server Yukon, Office, and 64-bit, and even more. So let's jump into Visual Studio and show how you can use those new features directly within the editor. In this example, I'm going to show some of the new code-focused RAD features. In particular, I'm going to create a products class and return a list of products directly onto an ASP.NET web page. So the first thing I need to do is to create the product class. To do this, I'm just going to start typing here. I'm going to type the word public. And you'll see I'm going to use a feature called code expansions. If I type the word class and I hit tab, you see I get basically a fill-in-the-blank snippet of code here. I'm going to give my class a name here. I'm going to call it products and click enter. Now I need to describe what a product has. So a product has a name, so I'm going to add some attributes here. Public, string, name. And as I'm looking at this code, I may want to be able to switch it, and rather than have it be a variable, make this into a property. So what I can do is right-click on it, choose refactor, and choose encapsulate field. What this will do is change my variable into a property. I'm just going to accept the defaults. If I had references to this variable, it would actually find and change those references as well. Since I don't, I'm just going to click OK. And you can see here the getter and setter for my property were created automatically. So now let's add a couple more properties. A product has a name, a product has a price, and a product has a quantity. So I'm going to just type the word property here and click tab. And this is actually another code expansion. I'm just going to accept the default value type of integer and change this. This is the private variable name, so I'm going to say int underscore price. Click tab, and the public name will be price. And let's go ahead and do that one more time. Write the word property, click tab, accept the default value, and this time the private is going to be underscore quantity, and the public is quantity. Click enter. Now, Visual Studio has written a lot of code. What it can actually do is highlight all this code and group it together using a region. And to do this nicely in Visual Studio Whidbey, if we right-click refactor, choose surround with, and choose region. So this will now all be within a region, and I'll call this region properties. Now if I just zoom up in my code and minimize that, by putting it in a region, everything's much more readable. So now I'm going to add a constructor here, products, and I'm going to pass in a couple values, string, name, int, price, int, quantity. And just set some values here. We'll set the underscore name equals name. Oops. Underscore price equals price. And underscore quantity equals quantity. Another nice feature, for example, is you can actually change the signature of a method. So if I select the method name, choose right-click refactor, and in particular I chose change method signature. This will actually give me a small preview window at the bottom of the screen, and I can reorder the values here. So I can, for example, switch quantity and price around and put that in another order. Click OK, and we see that our values have now changed. So I'm going to save our file, and now I'm going to create a list of these products, and I'm going to create a class that's going to be a product list class. So to do this, I'm going to use the class expansion again. I'm going to call this product list and click enter. And I'm going to add one method that's going to return a list of products. And in particular, notice here we have the generic collection classes. I'm going to create a generic collection class that's going to maintain that list, or return that list. So the return type is going to be a list, and it's going to be a list of products. And I'm just going to call my method getProducts. So with that created, I now want to actually create my variable list products. Just call it myList equals new. And you can see IntelliSense is smart enough to understand what the default value is, so if I just click tab, it'll create the new list of products. And now, when I go to add something directly into my list, I'll actually see that IntelliSense is smart enough. It's actually not going to let me add, for example, a string or an integer. It has to be a product type. Again, the power of generics and the power of IntelliSense understanding generic types. What I want to do here is create a new product. And I'm going to pass in a string, so we'll just call this product1. Quantity 1 and price of 2. And let's copy and paste a couple more products here. Let's change this to product 2, this to product 3, this to product 4. So there's our list of products, and I'll just return my list. So our code's now done. What I'm going to do is call the product list class, and in particular call the getProducts method, and bind it to an ASP.NET web page. So I'm going to click Save here, and now go into my ASP.NET web page. So just give this a title here, Product List. And I'm going to go into and use the new control, the grid view control here. So I'm just going to drag and drop this directly onto my page. You'll notice I get some grid view tasks. I'll just format this to make it a little prettier. Click OK. And we're going to connect to a data source. The nice thing is with ASP.NET Whidbey, you can actually connect to underlying data source, specifically objects. So I'm going to choose a data source, click New Data Source, and in particular I'm going to choose an object data source here. That's going to allow me to connect to those middle tier objects I created in the previous steps. Click Create, click Next. I can enable paging here, and click Finish. So now if we zoom in and go under the property, select an object data source, we zoom in here, the two properties we're going to set are the type name. This is going to represent the name of the class. We're going to type product list as the type name. And the select method, this is the name. We're just going to call this getProducts. And click Enter. So there our code is saved. And say, for example, if we jump back to our code, as we're using our code, we realize we want to be able to make some changes to our code. We have multiple pages that are using the class products, but really a product represents a single one. We don't want it to be plural. We can actually use the rename refactoring. So if I right-click, I choose Refactor, and choose Rename. This will actually let me find all the references within my project or across my solution, so multi-project, in the final release. And I'm just going to change products to products singular. I can preview the changes in search and comments and strings. I click OK, and I get this nice preview changes window. And what you'll see here is it actually lists all the different places that it found the variable products, using the power of the compiler to find these references. And I can right-click, for example, go to source, and it gives me the line number. And I can accept or unaccept these changes. I'll just click Run here to make the changes. And you'll see that all the values have now changed from products to product. So I like my code exactly the way it is. I'll go to my web page now. Change one property here so we can see paging. And I'll change the page size to 2. So we're only going to be able to see 2 items per page. So with that done, Let's run. Just click View in Browser here. So they're dynamically calling that get products, returning those values, and you can see that I can easily page through my data. So simple example, you saw the power of code expansions, generics, and how you can use object binding directly in ASP.NET for generic classes. So now I want to switch examples and show you a Windows form example. So I'm going to switch to another version of Visual Studio that I have running here. In this application, what I'm going to be doing is I've created a simple application that allows me to edit XML files. And what it does is it gives me 3 specific views for an XML file: a grid view, a text box view, and a new control for Whidbey called the web browser control. And what this basically is a built-in web browser. So what it does is, using the new WinBar control that you can actually see here, you can add buttons, text boxes, etc. I'm going to take whatever value is typed in this text box, open up the XML file, and open it up in 3 different ways. So some of the new features that we'll notice here in designing Windows forms, if we just right-click and choose View Edit Properties mode, this gives us all the property names. For example, you may not like label 2 as a name. We want to call this maybe label text box, for example. So you can change those values, and say, for example, rather than changing the name, you can change the property in this little window here, and maybe change the text, for example, or all the default values. And you'll see that these all change to the different values. So it's a pretty powerful feature, and you can simply turn it off by going back to the View Edit Properties mode. So what I'm going to do is show the code for this example. Let's first go into my Form1 CS file. I have 2 button click events. One is the open button click, and what that'll do is use a utility class to open up the XML file. Another one is to save the button, and another one is using anonymous methods in the form load. And I'll actually show the anonymous method first. So in this particular case, we have WinBar button 3.click. What we're using is the plus equals delegate. What this is basically an inline method. Rather than me explicitly declaring this event, I can put an anonymous method anywhere where I'm expecting a delegate. And what this basically does is it clears whatever values in the data set, it sets the web browser URL to a blank value, and sets the text box to a blank value. So pretty simple. You can see how you can use anonymous methods within your application. The next method I'm going to show is go into my open button here. I'm going to create this utility class, and whatever the user typed in the path, I'm basically going to set the value in the data set using a getDatasetXML. I'm going to set the value in the text box using a getStringXML. And the web browser, the nice thing is it can just set the path, and I just want to see that XML file in a browser. So I just set the URL property there. So let's look at some of these values. If I go to definition here, this is going to take me to my utility class. So I can do a couple of things here. One, as I'm looking at this class, it has a good signature. Maybe, for example, I want to reuse the getStringXML and getDatasetXML and save data for a web service or for a socket connections or whatever. I can think about reusing this specific contract in other applications. What I can actually do is right-click on the class, choose Refactor, and I can choose Extract Interface. And what this is going to do is it looks at my code, tells me what my public members are, and I can choose which one of those I want. It's going to create a new file name. And I'm going to click OK here, which you'll see it automatically creates an interface for me. And the nice thing is also, as I go back to my utils class, it actually adds that I am now complying to that specific contract, the iUtils interface that I just created. So let me just build here. And let's go into our first function. So let's go into the getStringXML. What this basically does is you pass in the file name, it checks if the file exists, and it uses a stream reader to basically pass in that file and read that file to end. Some of the things we can do if, for example, we want to comment this code out, and actually I'll show you the else real quick. It just returns not found. So if I just comment this out, you can see some of the other code expansions we can do here. So we can say if, and I click tab, and now it is looking for a expression to a value. I can say file.exists, and I can pass in file name. And now another classic example that C# developers use is the using statement. So if I type using and click tab, it now basically sets up that using code for me. But what I want to do actually is, rather than use the string meter class, use a new class for Whidbey. And in particular, I'm going to just call set this value here. The file has some new methods here. And I'm going to use the readAll method. So the readAll method, I basically pass it a file path. So I'll just choose file name here and set that value. And if I just type else, click tab, it does the code expansion for else, and I'll just say return file doesn't exist. So some simple ways to be able to use some of the new code expansions. So there's my basic file. I'm going to click build, make sure this still works. Ooh, I need to set a return value here. Return S. Okay, so let's jump into the getDataset.xml. This basically does exactly the same thing, checks if the file exists. If it does, then it reads it into a dataset and returns that dataset. Otherwise, it returns a blank dataset. And then finally, the saveData method. What this basically does is you pass in the file name and the dataset, and it saves that file. So one of the things we may want to do is to put some structured error handling around this. I can select the line of code, choose refactor, and choose surround with, and I can choose try catch. So I want to put this around a try catch, and I can put the specific exception type. I'll just say exception here. Click enter, and maybe we'll just write this to the debug window and say ex.toString. So simple stuff here. Click build, and should work. So let's actually look at our application running. I'm going to click run. First thing we're going to do, it's going to open up a states XML file. Click open. And it's opening it up in a grid view, in a text box, and in that web browser. So we can stretch this open, give you a better view. And if I right click, for example, you see all the typical things that you would see for a web browser: refresh, print, etc. Let's go ahead and change the value of the state ID for Alabama, because that is not AA, it should be AL, and click enter. Now I'm going to click save, and if we, for example, click refresh here, we see the change is made. If I click open, for example, or clear, and then open, you see that my change was persisted. So it's a pretty simple example. Let's now add a couple breakpoints, and I'll show you some of the new enhancements for debugging applications. I'm going to jump back to my file, and in particular I'm going to add breakpoints for save data, not for save data, I'm sorry, for getDataset.xml and for getString.xml. Let's click run here and click open. So this is going to ask me for a data set. A lot of times developers have been asking for the ability to get more information about a data set. So for example, you'll have a lot of content in a data set, but you won't be able to look at that content. So if we simply go through here, and I'm going to stop here, we now know there's the content of an XML file in the data set. But if we zoom in for this autos window, it's really difficult for you to navigate all this information. It just isn't possible for you to see in there. You'd have to go under tables, then under columns. It's really difficult to get a view of your data. Well, we've added debugger visualization. So if I click this ellipsis here, ... you'll see that this opens up, and I now have a rich way to view my in-memory objects. So this is our dataset viewer. And it's not available in the PDC build, but you can see how we can add rich visualization tools for your objects. And you can imagine your own complex hierarchy of objects that you could create. And as a component vendor, you could, for example, ship your own visualizers to help debug your applications. So now we understand what values are in our data set here. And I'm just going to jump back through our code. Click Run. And we're going to stop in the getString XML. And another feature that developers have been asking for is the ability to look at XML in a more meaningful way, as opposed to, say, a string. So if we jump through our page here, what we'll see in the autos window is we have this concatenated version of a string. You can't really see what the values are. In this case, we have a choice of visualizers that we can see. We can view it as XML, HTML, or text. I'm going to choose View as XML, and you'll see I get a rich debugger visualization of what this XML file looks in memory. So it's pretty powerful for you as an application developer to be able to use debugger visualizations to understand what's going on in your in-memory objects. Let's click Close, and just click Run, and our application worked. So in this example, you've seen a lot of the great features, including generics, code expansions, refactoring, and debugger visualizations, and how they can all work together for ASP.NET and Windows Forms applications. I hope you're looking forward to all the great new features available in Visual Studio Whidbey as much as I am. The combination of language, IDE, and platform together really make a powerful development platform, and I hope you'll enjoy coding as much as I do.